Hey y'all, welcome back to Twin Oaks Family Farm in rural Southeast Ohio, USA. We're taking a look at the Cornish rock cross meat birds that are in production for poultry. And actually what we're seeing right here is we are trying out one of the bigger feeders with the birds. So we want to see if they can reach into the feeder tray, and we want to see if they're standing or sitting when they're accessing feed from there. So we actually have one who's really immersed itself in the project of trying out the feeder. We've got one actually in the feeder tray, and that's okay. While they're real small, they can do that because they fit in there. But we're also watching the other ones around there, so I can see that two of them are sitting down. So definitely what the birds are telling me here is they can utilize those feeders. They can reach into the tray, they can access the food. They even are big enough that we can actually set a feeder like that up on a riser to try to get those birds standing up when they're eating. So we've just put in this feeder right before starting recording here. So we've had these baby feeder trays in the pen. There's 17 of these in here, and so we're having to fill those easily twice a day. So when we get to a capacity with our birds that we're starting to fill these feeder trays twice or pushing 3 times, that becomes really labor intensive. So that's a great juncture if we have bigger feeders to switch to bigger feeders. Now we could of course just put more of these feeders in, but that's a trade-off too, because the more of these feeders, the more of anything you put in the pen is taking up floor space from your birds. And so that becomes a tipping point with stocking density. And we want as much of the floor space dedicated to the birds themselves as possible. So we have to kind of gauge, you know, how much stuff we're putting into their pen. And we can kind of get to a point where, you know, we're better off. We're using less floor space to put in a handful of these feeders than we're taking up to utilize 20 plus of these feeders. So we could put more of these in if we have to. If what we have available in big feeders isn't enough capacity, then we can use the big feeders and small feeders in addition to that. But we'll try to get the birds to where we've got the big feeders in there. But for today, we just wanted to see, can they reach in the tray? Will they utilize that? And so good. We got a yes on that. You can see, let me try to get to another position. And we've got some over at a baby feeder. They've actually been up and active and ready to take a resting phase. So we've got some there at that feeder, but we've just filled all these. We had allowed them to eat all of them down. So we've mentioned that our reference point is we want to see a meat bird eat 10 pounds or less, but generally it's going to take us about 10 pounds to start, grow, and finish each meat bird. So we just take, to know how much feed we need for the production length, which for us is either going to be 5 weeks or 6 weeks, we just take, and we can make that 10-pound target per bird work on either 5 or 6 weeks. So we just, you know, we watch the feed consumption and we target it. And so if we see them as a flock eating through it faster than we need them to, you know, we can just hold them back a little bit. If we see them kind of not eating through it as fast as we expected, then we have 2 objectives. We need to find out why, because they should be eating it. So that may be like an ambient temperature issue or a stressor issue. So the first thing we would do is correct that. And then the second thing we would do is maybe add feeders and keep more feed in the pen at any given time to make sure that the feed capacity is there for what we want them to be consuming. But at this point, we feel like we're right on with feed consumption. Over their whole production, this group will consume about 4,000 pounds of feed is our expectation. When we dole that out through 50-pound bags, that's 80 50-pound bags we have on site for them ready to go so that we can keep them on the consistent same feed start to finish, and that's what we want. But we have fed out, distributed 200 pounds to this group of birds at this point. So that includes what's on the floor, but they have been given 200 pounds. All the feeders that are on the floor hold a total of about 25 pounds. So that's what I've just added to the floor space, is about 25 pounds of feed for them. And we topped off waters. So we're also integrating the larger waters. We've had about 12-gallon capacity in these small waters in here at all times. And we're getting to where we're filling that about 3 times a day. So again, you know, we can do that, but that just becomes more and more labor intensive as they grow, because they're going to consume more and more water daily. It's neat to see them at the feeders. So like, you know, we've got groups kind of hitting these feeders now again. So it's really neat to see them at the feeders. But we have so many feeders in because we want them to have a lot of space. If most of them want to eat at one time, we want them to be able to access all that. But they are kind of hitting some feeders here. So on the waters, though, I was talking about that. So we've put a couple of the 5-gallon waters in the middle. Hey, look, and they're really, yeah, they're doing a good job. Yeah, that's good stuff. They're doing a good job using that water. So we like those waters because we can just take the lid off and pour 5 gallons in. As opposed to these, we have to actually take that whole unit out, turn it upside down, dump the water out of the reservoir, unscrew the reservoir, fill it in an upside down fashion, put the tray back on and flip it back over. So it takes a lot more time for a lot less capacity to do those one at a time than to fill one of the 5-gallon feeders at a time, or waters, pardon me. So we like those waters. So we actually only have 4 of those. And 20-gallon capacity and only 4 water space. That's probably not ideal for this flock of 433. But on the other hand, something we're trying to be diligent about is keeping costs very minimal. You know, obviously we have to have the necessities. But if we can avoid having to buy a lot more feeders and waters, we really would like to avoid having to buy a lot more feeders and waters, because you wouldn't think those are very expensive, but they are. And when you need to buy multiples of them, that compounds and adds up super fast. So anyway, so if we have to, we'll have the big waters in, and we'll continue to supplement with the small waters. And they, even as bigger birds out at finish, they really like the 1-gallon waters. They kind of drive you crazy, because if you put those in the pen for them, they'll empty them. And kind of empty them faster sometimes than the big waters. But they like those throughout production. But there again, that's why we put so many of them in the pen. We just want them to always be able to get to food and water wherever and whenever they want it. That really helps the birds thrive and helps the flock succeed overall. So water wise though, they're drinking a lot, which is great. It's a great sign. You never want to be complaining or feeling negative about your birds drinking a lot of water. They need to drink a lot of water. Digestion has to have water. Metabolic processes in their body have to have water. Water is basically the most important nutrient, and it supports the digestion of the feed, supports the growth, supports the immune system. So if you have a flock that goes off of the water, you got a problem, and you need to figure out how to fix it, figure out what they need. You don't want them going off water. If they go off water, they're also going to go off feed. So you want to make sure that you keep your birds drinking water, and especially, you know, under all conditions. But when it's hot, water. You especially want them taking in the water, and they'll eat. They're not going to eat in the hottest part of the day if they have the option, but they will eat. They'll make up for it when temperatures cool overnight. Anytime you hear one chirping loud, you know, go find out who's making noise and make sure they're not in distress. Obviously, That one's really not in distress. It just was with a group of birds and they all took off this way. So now it's like calling out to its buddies. You know, it's pretty cool that the chickens, they recognize easily, they say, at least 100 faces. And that can include animals and people. So in this group of 433, we can assume that they are familiar with at least 100 of their peers in their flock or their counterparts. And definitely they're familiar with our faces, my household. There's 5 of us. We all help.